were not placed in that relationship by chance. Long before you even encountered the narcissist, a purpose was already written for your life and theirs. Your arrival in their world wasn't the result of a mistake, poor judgment, or weakness. It was divine strategy. Purpose is the reason for presence, not the other way around. You were assigned, not invited. God saw the chaos, the manipulation, the brokenness, and still chose you as a vessel to interrupt it, to confront it, to expose it, not through violence or revenge, but through truth, love, and light. The narcissist's life may have been full of facades, illusions, and unchecked patterns, but purpose sees past personality. It doesn't get distracted by charm or appearance. Your presence was a divine contradiction to their control. You walked in carrying something they lacked: clarity, empathy, integrity, and that made you dangerous to their dysfunction. They may have seen you as weak or naive, but in reality, your character exposed their wounds. Your stability irritated their chaos. That's not a coincidence. It's purpose in action. Even the pain had intention behind it. You were never meant to stay trapped, but you were meant to show up. You were meant to trigger transformation, whether they accepted it or not. Your arrival may have been quiet, but your presence was powerful. You were the evidence of an alternative reality, a standard they couldn't manipulate. And that very presence was the mirror, one they couldn't handle, but couldn't ignore. You didn't enter their life to be consumed by it. You were sent to confront what was hidden, even if it was with nothing more than your consistency, your refusal to be redefined, your decision to walk away whole. Purpose doesn't always feel comfortable. It often looks like heartbreak before healing. But your presence fulfilled something eternal. You walked in when they needed a wake-up call, a reflection, a disruption. Even if they never changed, the assignment was real, and you were the right one to carry it. You were never just someone who got caught in a toxic relationship. You were the answer to a spiritual imbalance. You didn't stumble into that connection, you were sent. When you encountered the narcissist, you didn't just walk into their life. You walked into a system that had gone unchecked for years, maybe even generations. And while you may have felt used, manipulated, and misunderstood, none of that changes the fact that your presence carried weight, purpose, and power. Victims stay stuck in the pain, but solutions shift the atmosphere, even if the process hurts. You didn't break because you were weak. You resisted because you were built for more. Your heart, your compassion, your honesty, those weren't flaws to be exploited. They were divine tools placed inside you to expose dysfunction and provoke confrontation with truth. Narcissists thrive in environments where no one questions them. But the moment you showed up, the atmosphere shifted. Your empathy confused their manipulation. Your boundaries disrupted their control. Your consistency was louder than their lies. You didn't just survive the chaos, you challenged it. Simply by being who you are. Being a solution doesn't mean fixing the narcissist. It means embodying a higher standard, even when you're being attacked for it. It means refusing to let their behavior redefine your identity. You weren't there to play their game, you were there to reveal its emptiness. Even when you were at your lowest, Even when your voice trembled or your confidence cracked, you were still a threat to their illusion. Because a soul aligned with truth is always more powerful than one built on deception. You might have questioned your worth, your decisions, your strength, but the fact that you made it out with your integrity intact is evidence that you were never the weak one. The real victory is not in how they treated you, but in how you refused to become them. You were sent in as a light, and lights don't need permission to shine. Even in the darkest space, your presence revealed what they worked so hard to hide. That's not what victims do. That's what solutions do. Pain has a way of making us question everything, our choices, our worth, even our faith. But when seen through the lens of purpose, pain becomes more than just suffering. It becomes a tool. The emotional weight you carried in that relationship wasn't meaningless. It was doing something deep, something eternal, even when you couldn't see it. The heartbreak, the confusion, the silent battles. They were not signs of your failure. They were the chisels shaping the deeper parts of your character, the fire refining your discernment, the process unlocking your next level. The narcissist wasn't just a person who hurt you. They were a lesson wrapped in human form. The pain you experienced at their hands exposed parts of you that needed healing, attention, and growth. You learned to recognize manipulation, not because someone warned you, but because you felt it. You learned the importance of boundaries, not because a book taught you, but because your soul was stretched by someone who ignored them. Pain taught you what peace should feel like. It gave you a clearer contrast between what is holy and what is harmful. Without that pain, you might still be tolerating less than you deserve. Without it, you might still be shrinking yourself to keep others comfortable. But every tear you cried became a silent prayer. Every sleepless night became a sacred moment of clarity. Pain slowed you down so you could see what you missed, so you could finally hear what God was trying to whisper all along. You were made for more. And as much as it hurt, you didn't die in it. You didn't lose your value in it. In fact, the pain revealed just how valuable you really are. That suffering wasn't wasted. It sharpened your vision. It recalibrated your priorities. It pushed you toward healing, toward strength, toward a version of yourself that wouldn't have been born in comfort. Sometimes the very things that break us are the things that birth us. What felt like destruction was actually construction. What felt like punishment was preparation. You didn't just go through it, you grew through it. And in that, the pain served its purpose. There comes a point when you realize that your presence in someone's life was not about how deeply you felt for them, but about how faithfully you fulfilled your assignment. You may have loved the narcissist with sincerity, with depth, with patience, but your assignment was never to fix them. It was to be exactly who you were created to be, even in the face of their dysfunction. When God sends you into someone's life, it's not based on your emotional desires. It's based on His divine strategy. And divine assignments require obedience more than they require attachment. You were there to reflect something they couldn't fabricate, a love that wasn't performative, a truth that couldn't be twisted, a standard they couldn't manipulate. But when emotions begin to override purpose, you start clinging to the person instead of honoring the mission. That's when confusion sets in. You start asking why they don't change, why they can't see your worth, why love isn't enough. But the truth is, love was never the full mission. Clarity was. exposure was, disruption was. Sometimes your job was to simply reveal, not remain. Emotions will tell you to stay when God is telling you to leave. Emotions will keep you trying to explain yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you. But assignments don't require constant explanation. They require clarity and obedience. The success of your role wasn't in how long you stayed or how much you gave. It was in how faithfully you obeyed the tug in your spirit when it was time to step away. You were never called to carry the weight of someone else's healing. You were called to plant a seed, maybe to water it. Separation doesn't always feel like success in the moment. It often feels like failure, like loss, like the unraveling of everything you try to hold together. But in the realm of purpose, separation is often the sign that the assignment has been completed. What looked like a breakup was actually a breakthrough. What felt like rejection was really redirection. When you finally walked away from the narcissist, you didn't just leave a relationship. You crossed a threshold. You stepped out of a cycle and into your next level. That's not defeat. That's graduation. Division wasn't giving up. It was passing a test. The test of self-worth, of spiritual discernment, of obedience to that still small voice inside you that had been telling you for a long time that you were meant for more. Graduation never means the classroom didn't matter. It means the lesson was learned. You saw what needed to be seen. You learned what couldn't be taught in comfort. You discovered how much strength it takes to leave what's familiar when it no longer feeds your soul. You realize that peace costs more than presence. And freedom is worth the discomfort of change. Separation didn't just distance you from them, it reintroduced you to you. The version of yourself that was hidden beneath compromise, beneath fear, beneath the need to be enough for someone who was never ready to receive you. When you walked away, you reclaimed your authority. You chose your sanity over their chaos. You chose truth over fantasy. That's the kind of decision that shifts everything. You didn't graduate with applause, but you graduate with power. You didn't get a certificate, but you earned your clarity, your wholeness, your freedom. And even if they never acknowledge what you brought into their life, heaven did. Even if no one clapped when you left, the spiritual realm knew you had just passed one of the hardest tests of your life. You stopped bleeding for someone who wouldn't even acknowledge your wound. You stopped explaining yourself to someone who refused to listen. And that decision, though it broke your heart, healed your future. Graduation doesn't require validation, it requires release. And you had the courage to let go. That was your crossing point. That was your promotion. And they may never admit it. They may continue pretending you meant nothing, that your words had no weight, that your presence didn't shift anything. But denial does not erase impact. The truth is, your existence in their life challenged everything they built their identity on. You stood in front of them with authenticity they couldn't imitate, with love they didn't know how to receive, and with strength they hoped you'd never find. Your impact wasn't measured by the acknowledgement. It was measured by the internal disruption they experienced when they could no longer control you. You didn't need a title to be powerful. You didn't need their validation to be effective. just your consistency, your compassion, your boundaries. Those alone exposed the deep fractures beneath their ego. Narcissists thrive on control, but your refusal to be controlled forced them to confront something unfamiliar: accountability. Your voice was more than noise, it was a mirror. Your silence, when you stopped defending yourself, spoke louder than any argument. Your absence, when you finally walked away, echoed louder than your presence ever could. That's impact. They tried to reduce you to a reaction, to make you question your value, to convince you that you were the unstable one. But in reality, you were the catalyst. You brought tension to their comfort. You introduced truth into their performance. And even if they buried your influence under pride, they will never unfeel what your presence stirred in them. You woke something up. You reminded them of what real love looks like: firm, clear, honest, unshakable. And while they may continue building walls around their ego, cracks were formed the moment you entered. Your strength outlived their manipulation. Your character outlasted their tactics. And while they may have chosen to remain unchanged, that doesn't mean you failed. Their reaction to your truth is not your responsibility. What matters is that you fulfilled your role. You planted seeds that time or another person may water. You broke patterns that have been running unchecked. You set a new standard not just for them, but for yourself. And that kind of impact cannot be undone. Ego resists it. Pride masks it. But deep down, they know. They felt it. You were never just someone passing through. You were a divine disruption. So when you look back on that chapter, on the confusion, the heartbreak, the spiritual warfare, don't see it as wasted time. See it as a divine assignment fulfilled. You were not placed in the narcissist's life to be broken. You were sent to be a mirror, a message, a moment of clarity in the middle of chaos. And even if they never change, even if they never say thank you, heaven has already confirmed your success. You completed the mission. You walked through fire and came out refined. You chose healing over hate, wisdom over revenge, purpose over pain. That's not just survival, that's victory. And now with your head high and your soul whole, you move forward, not bitter, but better. Not lost, but led. Because God doesn't waste vessels. And He certainly didn't waste you.